Galw'r aelodau I drefn yr eitem gyntaf.
Call members to order, and the first item on the agenda this afternoon is questions to the First Minister, and the first question is from Lynn Eagle.
Will the First Minister provide an update on the Welsh Government's policy to tackle child poverty in Wales?
Yes, we are committed to a whole government approach to tackling child poverty, and we're taking action to ensure that every child has the best start in life, and our child poverty strategy sets out our objectives and policy.
A new Equality and Human Rights Commission Wales report estimates that there could be 50,000 more Welsh children living in poverty by 2021 because of the Tory government's welfare reforms. Given the challenges we face in tackling child poverty and the huge concern that has been expressed over the decision to end the school uniform grant in Wales, will the Welsh Government look again at this, and will the Welsh Government also take urgent action to ensure that its 2011 guidance, designed to ensure that school uniforms are affordable for families, is strengthened and properly implemented across Wales?
Yes, can I give the member the assurance that in the next academic year there will be a scheme in place that is broader than the current school uniform grant? That will be of huge assistance to many, many parents and many, many children, and it's intended that the process of moving on to that new system will be seamless.
Mark Reckless.
First Minister, do you at least welcome the 100,000 reduction in the number of Welsh children living in absolute poverty since 2010? And do you accept the benefit cap has impacted most in London, which had 90% of housing benefit claims above 20,000, rather than in Wales? And will you credit the near doubling of the tax-free allowance since 2010 for its role in helping many less well-off families?
Well, let me tell you, I deplore the enormous cuts in public funding that we've seen since 2010 from a Conservative government. The bung that was given to Northern Ireland of £1 billion for health and education, whereas Wales got absolutely nothing. The fact that so many children have suffered as a result of impositions such as the bedroom tax, such as their own incomes and their families, their parents' incomes not going up, not being supported. Nobody in this chamber can seriously believe that the Tories care about child poverty, or the last 8 years has seen an improvement in poverty levels in Wales.
Leanne Wood.
I'm outraged by those figures that were relayed earlier on, and many of those contributory factors are out with your control. But the school uniform grant is something that is within your control. Now, while the Assembly was in recess and at the same time as your flagship anti-poverty programme, the community's first programme, was wound up, we heard that you intend to cut the school uniform grant to a tune of £700,000, which is a small amount of money in the scheme of things, a grant that helps some of the poorest families access education. While you're prepared to cut this amount of money, it looks petty, First Minister. What assessment have you made regarding the issue of child poverty and the impact of this change on child poverty? And will you agree to write to school heads to ask them to allow pupils to wear non-logoed uniform items in order to try and mitigate some of the impact of this cut to the school uniform grant?
Can I give the Leader of Plaid Cymru an assurance that the Education Secretary is in the process, as I said, of looking to introduce an improved grant that suits families' needs better, something which supports better access to curriculum activities and learning opportunities that might otherwise be denied to learners due to cost. A number of councils have already confirmed they will continue to run the Year 7 school uniform scheme, or run similar schemes in 2018 to 19. While the school uniform grant is certainly helpful for families, it was also inflexible because the money could only be used for school uniforms. And I know that what we are looking to introduce in September will be a scheme that is broader than that and looks to help low-income families with so many of the costs of education.
Question 2, Russell.
Question 2, Russell George.
What does the Welsh Government provide to independent abattoirs in Wales?
Yes, we'll shortly be launching a £1.1 million food business investment scheme package of grant aid, specifically to help small and medium-sized slaughterhouses in Wales. That will enable such businesses, which are often in remote areas, to invest in competitiveness and also to ensure their resilience and, of course, to make sure that they are sustainable in the long term.
First Minister, I think we all want to see high standards of animal welfare in our slaughterhouses, and that, of course, goes for independent abattoirs as well. I know the one in my own constituency takes great pride in the respectful way in which they treat animals. I'm aware the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs is still looking at CCTV in slaughterhouses, and it seems that no decision has yet been made. Can I ask what specific financial support you will offer to slaughterhouses and independent abattoirs in particular for the installation of CCTV, should the Cabinet Secretary make the decision in that regard?
Well, that's what this grant can be used for. What we will not do is impose CCTV before abattoirs in Wales are ready. In England, of course, we know this is moving ahead on a compulsory basis. We want Wales' slaughterhouses to be fully prepared. We don't rule it out, but at this stage, what is hugely important is that there's assistance for abattoirs to be ready if that is the direction that we take.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, when devolution came into being in 1999, we said that at that time things were going to be different, politics was going to be different. This morning, your government and yourself in particular wrote a letter to the Presiding Officer indicating that you were minded to seek a legal judgment from the court to stop a debate in this chamber taking place tomorrow. The only place we can find any comparable comparisons is the country of Egypt, where the executive tries to stop the legislature debating and discussing and voting on a motion that comes before it that is deemed incompetence. Why are you trying to silence the Assembly?
Well, the Leader of the Opposition is wrong. There's actually no power to prevent a debate happening in this chamber except that which resides in the hands of the Presiding Officer. That's not what the letter is about.
As I understand it, First Minister, from the letter that you sent to the Presiding Officer, you seem to deem yourself outside the scope of the Government of Wales provision, and therefore you do not feel that you are bound by the provisions within the Government of Wales Act, and that is what you will be seeking a judgment from the court if you seek that route. That, in effect, places you above the law if you take your interpretation to the extreme, because you're saying your ministers are bound by the provisions within the Government of Wales Act, but you yourself are not. Now, surely, First Minister, you should allow this debate to go ahead tomorrow, allow the debate, because it's deemed incompetence, it's on the order paper, and I would seek confirmation from you today that you will not try and intervene and stop this debate taking place tomorrow afternoon.
I have no power to intervene to stop the debate taking place. That's a matter for the Presiding Officer. And also, the Leader of the Opposition inadvertently misleads the Assembly when he claims the effect of Section 37, as we interpret it, is to put the First Minister beyond the law. It is not. The interpretation that we place on Section 37 is that it applies specifically to Welsh ministers and not to the functions of the First Minister. Now, that is an issue that is hugely important in law. It's hugely important. Now, if something is in dispute in terms of the law, it's perfectly proper that clarity is sought as to how the law operates. We can't operate in a slapdash way. We have to make sure we have clarity for government and indeed for the Assembly.
First Minister, I never thought I'd stand in this chamber and find us debating these type of points or discussing these type of points where you as First Minister, because it's your signature on the bottom of that letter, is trying to prevent a debate coming forward tomorrow because you want to seek a judgment of the court to prevent that happening. Now, you have said time and time again that the substance of the debate tomorrow, which is the leak inquiry report, is the ownership of the Permanent Secretary, and it is for her to determine whether that report should come forward. Why are you intervening now to try and stop that report coming forward? Because if that report became public and people could form an opinion with suitable redactions, which is what we've called for in the motion tomorrow, to protect the identity of any witnesses that have wished that identity to be protected, people could form an opinion on that report. Instead, today, the first day back after the Easter recess, we are looking at you as First Minister, who has sent a letter to the Presiding Officer trying to silence the Assembly. That is the wrong way to do democracy here in Wales.
It misleads the Assembly. It misleads the Assembly to suggest that we have the power to stop the Presiding Officer allowing a debate. That's not what the situation is here. Now, let me explain what the situation actually... Well,
I'm interested in hearing the First Minister's response.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First of all, I have no fear of the leak inquiry. I ordered it, and it is something that I was under no... it was not imposed on me. It was something that I took forward, and members can see the conclusion. But there are far wider legal issues here that arise as a result of the operation of Section 37. And it's worth me exploring them with members in detail. Now, first of all, there have been discussions with the Presiding Officer. It's not the case that this came out of the blue. It's not something I would choose to do, I have to say, if other options were available. But we have to protect the position of a senior member of Welsh Government staff who, if the motion was passed, would be at risk of prosecution. This is a serious issue, hugely serious legal issue, and it is incumbent on us to make sure that steps are taken to protect her. But it goes beyond that. Section 37 is so broadly defined that without greater clarity, well, if the member wanted to listen carefully, you might learn something, okay? Section 37 is so broadly defined, and it lacks such clarity, that potentially any document of any kind that is in the control of a minister or an employee of Welsh Government is potentially releasable. Any document, regardless of whether it is caught by an exemption of the Freedom of Information Act, regardless of whether it is caught by the Data Protection Act, regardless of whether the document might be libellous, regardless of whether the document might contain details of national security. Now, I have in my possession documents that are given to me as First Minister that deal with national security. Under the interpretation at the moment that we have, that will be releasable. That will be releasable. What it is, there's no clarity on it. Secondly,
allow the First Minister to be heard.
Secondly, documents that are commercially confidential now no longer, under the interpretation and lack of clarity that we have now, are no longer subject to confidentiality. It means that any document, a tender bid, for example, a commercially confidential document, would be potentially releasable without further clarity. That is the reality of it, without further clarity. Well, if members don't want to listen, I'm trying to put a reasonable case here for them. If they don't want to listen, that's a matter for them. More importantly, if a whistleblower came forward to a minister with a serious allegation on the basis of confidentiality, and a document was created as a result of that, there is now no guarantee of confidentiality without further clarity. There is no guarantee. I cannot give, as First Minister, any guarantee of confidentiality to anybody, nor can any other Welsh Minister, until this matter is clarified. Until this matter is clarified. It also means that any person who produces a document in confidence or who gives evidence in confidence to any investigation or inquiry is now not able to receive an absolute guarantee of confidence. That's how serious the situation is. Now, how can this be resolved? How can this be resolved? Well, there are three ways of resolving it. First of all, a change in the law, Section 37. We can't do that, because Section 37 is incredibly badly drafted. Nobody disputes that. We can't do anything about that. Secondly, not my choice, not my first choice, is for the matter to be decided in the courts by way of a declaration. That is not the way that I would want to deal with this. We have to protect our position as a government. The third way of doing it is for a protocol to be developed, as happens at every other parliament, a protocol to be developed in order for members to understand what would be in order and what documents would be releasable in the future. And this is exactly what happens at Westminster. There is no reason why this can't happen in the Assembly. So I reiterate the offer we have already made to the Commission, and we make it in good faith, and that is, tomorrow's debate is not time sensitive, and I do not advocate cancelling the debate. I don't advocate withdrawing the debate, but there is an opportunity for that debate to happen in the future. What is clear here is there are serious legal and constitutional issues that have arisen that need to be resolved, and the way to resolve it, surely, is for this to be done working with the Commission to develop a protocol to provide greater clarity to members. I make that offer to the Commission and indeed to you, Presiding Officer, to deal with this issue in a way that avoids the need for legal action.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Llawn.
Plaid Cymru Leader Llawn Wood.
The problem is that sounds like a threat, First Minister, and the questions of openness and transparency are not going to go away. They cut to the very heart of democracy. And if there are so many problems with the Wales Act, why have they only now been identified? These matters will be coming back to them, but I want to ask you about the question of Syria. Does the First Minister support military intervention in Syria?
I received a phone call at midnight on Saturday morning from Downing Street. I received a briefing from the Prime Minister. It was clear what the action was going to be. I made clear to her my concern that I feared that there would be civilian casualties, given the complicated mosaic on the ground in Syria. That doesn't seem to have happened, but my concern was made to her at the time. But I was very concerned that it wouldn't be possible to take any action without civilian casualties, and that was something I wanted to avoid.
My party is committed to opposing these tokenistic American-led airstrikes, and I'd like to remind the First Minister that the road to peace is rarely paved with the weapons of war. Now, the effectiveness in terms of stopping Syrian suffering is far from clear. The Prime Minister herself has said that these strikes were not intended to change the course of the war in Syria and end the suffering of the Syrian people. Without a single vote cast in this Parliament, Westminster or anywhere else, the First Minister was quick to show his support for those airstrikes. So can he now tell this Assembly, does he believe that Westminster should be able to start wars without any parliamentary approval?
Well, it's not a war, because that prerogative lies with the monarch. It is military action, that is true. Well, there is a precedent for it. David Cameron asked for a vote in Parliament, and it's a matter for the current Prime Minister to explain as to why there wasn't a vote this time around. There are great dangers here. Syria is complicated. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind there was a chemical attack, and anything that removes the capability of such an attack occurring in the future is something I would support. What I would be extremely sceptical of would be an acceleration or escalation of military action in Syria that would lead, to my mind, inevitably to civilian casualties. And that, of course, would be a propaganda boost for those countries that are already in Syria and who themselves have a case to answer for what they're doing.
But that risk is there now, isn't it? For me, it's not a question of bombing in Iraq and then bombing in Syria. I don't see much of a difference. Those were the complacent words of the First Minister when the prospect of British bombs being dropped on Syria first arose back in 2015. He supported bombing campaigns in Syria then, and he supports them now. Yesterday, the First Minister's London Labour boss questioned the legality, the morality and the effectiveness of the strikes. Does the First Minister harbour the same concerns, or does he stand by his comments in support for the Prime Minister and her airstrikes in the British national interest?
Well, firstly, I have no reason to doubt the soundness of the legal advice. On the issue of morality, well, we are talking here about a chemical attack that occurred on defenceless civilians. And if an attack means that the capability of repeating that is no longer there, then yes, I would support that. Yes, I would support that.
That's not the case.
The third point then is effectiveness. Well, time will tell. Time will tell. What I would not support is any military action that will put the lives of civilians at risk. That's a propaganda boom to other countries, a propaganda boost. But there was a chemical attack by the Assad regime. Of that, I am convinced. Secondly, I believe that these missile launches were designed to reduce or remove the capacity of a chemical attack in the future. That surely must be something that should be welcomed in order to avoid those attacks happening in the future. But in terms of escalation, no, there are great dangers of that.
Leader of the UKIP group, Neil Hamilton.
I listened to the First Minister's tortuous, legalistic response to the Leader of the Opposition earlier on. I was reminded of Dennis Healy's first law of holes, that when in one, the best thing to do is to stop digging. Another international comparison of the position that the First Minister seems to find himself in today is the Watergate affair, and he'll remember that it wasn't the break-in that actually brought down Richard Nixon, but the attempted cover-up. The President in that case said that when the President does it, it's not illegal. Does the First Minister really want to go down in history as the tricky dicky of Welsh politics?
Well, this is the man who defends Enoch Powell. This is the man who defends Enoch Powell. He seeks to lecture us on morality. Have a good look at yourself is my response to that. No one suggests that anybody is above the law, but I'd be interested to know whether there's anything that I said with which he disagrees.
Well, if I were counsel for in any legal action might be brought, I would provide a legal argument for it. But the subsection which the First Minister refers to states that, in relation to ministers' functions, or rather the letter states that Section 37, in relation to ministers' functions, must identify a function which is exercisable by the First Minister and Welsh ministers collectively. If the function in question is exercisable by the First Minister alone, Section 37 has no application. So what he's effectively saying is that if it's Welsh ministers together, they are scrutinisable in the way that Section 37 provides. But if it's the First Minister alone, he isn't. That seems to be a very perverse interpretation of a very clear section.
Well, I find it very strange, as somebody who stands here in First Minister's questions every week, and has missed very few, to suggest that somehow I'm afraid of scrutiny. But the law is the law, and the law has to be applied. Now, there is a difference of interpretation. There are two ways of resolving that interpretation, one of which it would be my preferred way, which I already outlined, the other one which is more formal. But I believe that there is a way of resolving this in order to provide members with more transparency and to provide government with the kind of comfort that it needs. I mean, I ask members in this chamber, I ask the leaders of parties in this chamber, if you were in a position where you had been given documents in confidence and you found yourself with a vote demanding those documents should be produced, what would your response be? You know, put yourself in the position of, you want to be in government, put yourself in the position of somebody who is leading a government. It's hugely important that there is clarity in this regard, and that clarity, I hope, can be developed working with the Commission and the Presiding Officer in the future.
Well, I'm sure the First Minister is also aware of subsection 6 of Section 37, which says that if the Assembly does pass a motion requiring the production of a document, a direction may be issued by the First Minister or the Government to direct the person at which that requirement is pointed not to comply with it. That, of course, would place the Government in a very embarrassing position, but it would protect against the legal consequences which the First Minister was adumbrating earlier on. And it would seem a very perverse outcome again in relation to what he said about how this would breach commercial confidentiality potentially, wide implications of what this is supposed to risk. If anything which the First Minister was dealing with would be gaggable or could be prevented from publication, but anything that any other minister does is perfectly open to scrutiny, whether it be in a court of law or in a court of public opinion or in this democratic assembly which represents the whole of the Welsh people.
No, there are two issues. Firstly, as to whether the First Minister's functions are actually part of the operation of Section 37, and secondly, the broader Pandora's box that has now been opened, which is what documents are releasable under Section 37. If all documents are releasable, I can't see how government can continue, bluntly. Is that bad? There has to be some limit. Surely the operation of the Data Protection Act, the operation of the Freedom of Information... See, I know the Tories haven't thought this far, but the operation of the Freedom of Information Act, they would not apply. They would not apply in these circumstances. There has to be some limit to this. At this moment in time, government cannot give a guarantee of confidentiality to anybody. And that is an interpretation that we can't clearly accept. I think it's in everyone's interest to get that clarity. Secondly, he only read out the first part of the subsection 6. Yes, it is possible for a direction to be issued that the person not comply with a notice, but then another person has to be specified that has to comply with a notice. It's not absolute discretion. So have a look at the second part of the section, and it'll give you a good idea of how the subsection operates. Yes, it is possible to direct that the person should not comply, but someone else has to be put in their place. So actually the discretion is not as absolute as the member describes.
Question 3, Darren Miller.
Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government support for children and young people in Llywydd West?
Yes, we provide universal and targeted support for children and young people across Wales, enabling them to achieve their full potential. And this includes enhanced social care, childcare, education, play, youth services and support for additional learning needs and disabilities.
First Minister, in common with other parts of Wales, children in my constituency have also been affected by the withdrawal of the school uniform grant. I listened carefully to what you suggested was going to take place, i.e. that there's going to be a successor grant. But of course this existing grant, which has now been withdrawn, was withdrawn without any consultation whatsoever with key stakeholders, including parent groups, and nor was there consultation, as I understand it, with our Children, Young People and Education Committee. Given that that was the case, can I also ask how that demonstrates compliance with the children's rights impact assessments, which you, as a government, must undertake when taking decisions of this nature?
Where was the consultation on the bedroom tax? Where was the consultation on PIP? Where's the consultation on the mess of the benefit on universal credit? Nothing at all. I don't take lectures from the Conservative Party about consultation. They are the most secretive party in government that has ever been produced. But he asked the question about what has happened with the school uniform grant. I've already said to him that there will be something better in place in good time for September.
No.
Llyr Griffith.
Was that it? They may be bad. They may be very, very bad. But you haven't answered the question, First Minister. So maybe could I ask whether the First Minister would answer the question?
I answered it in the supplementary in question 1. I thought very clearly.
Cwestiwn 4, Gareth.
Question 4, Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. Well, the First Minister...
Cwestiwn 4, Gareth.
Question 4, Gareth Bennett.
Please allow the question to be asked.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the provision of a bus station in Cardiff city centre?
Yes, the new bus station will be one of the first infrastructure...
First Minister.
The new bus station will be one of the first infrastructure projects operated by the Welsh Government subsidiary, Transport for Wales. Construction will start this year, and the project will pave the way for a fully integrated multimodal transport hub at the core of the new metro system.
Yes, thanks for the answer. I think a transport hub is what we do need, and I think a crucial part of that will be the provision of a coach station as part of the overall plans for Central Square. Do we currently have any guarantees that a new coach station will be part of the finalised project?
That will be something that will have to be examined as part of the project itself. At the moment, the coaches come into Sophia Gardens, if I remember rightly. But clearly, we would want to move to a situation where the transport hub is fully integrated in terms of all forms of transport.
David Melding.
I think many of us are very confused if this is the coach station or does it include local buses as well, because as I understand it, the need for local transport being centred at the train station is really important, where the central station used to be, and it was part of the final scheme that the bus station would be redesigned and be part of this new exciting project. And indeed, the architects Fosters and Partners were chosen to design that last phase to incorporate a bus station for Cardiff Bus. So what is happening? Is this part of what we're talking about at the moment, or is this drifting into another project completely?
No. What we are seeking to provide is seamless integration between trains, buses, coaches and the metro, and to provide easy access for cyclists and pedestrians. That is important. I know that the member Plenary is looking at me when I say that. So the intention is to provide a hub that is as integrated as possible.
Jenny Rathbone.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cardiff residents have been waiting over a decade for a new bus station, and this is becoming an issue that is really making people feel very aggrieved. Last year, I was told by Right Acres that the development of the bus station would happen in January this year. Obviously, nothing yet has happened. I hear you say it's now going to happen this year. I'm just really concerned about the constant delays and the way in which this makes people cynical about our desire to provide a bus station, which is crucial to the future health and well-being of all the shopping facilities in the city centre. We absolutely do not want people arriving by car because of the air pollution problem. We had an excellent Foster design. The Welsh Government is now the leaseholder, and you're going to be deciding on the design. What's wrong with the Foster design? Is it not possible to go ahead with the first part of it when you're waiting for your new tenants of the area above the bus station? But we definitely need a bus station because people at the moment do not know where they have to get their bus. And it's over a decade, so I'm grateful for any clarification of what's going to happen.
I can give the member the assurance that spades will be in the ground in June. That is the plan in order to move this forward, and completion is scheduled for the middle of 2021.
Question 5.
Question 5, Llyr Griffith. Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the future of the school uniform grant?
Well, he's asking the same question as he asked previously. Well, we are looking at options at providing a more appropriate grant that better suits families, including opportunities that might otherwise be denied to learners due to cost.
Can you confirm that there will be no cut in the budget available, the funding available to support the purchasing of school uniforms? Because the response of a spokesperson on behalf of your government to the censure following the announcement was that school uniforms are now cheaper. Well, I have personally experienced there are at least 2 secondary schools in my area which have moved to new school uniforms, and you can't buy them in supermarkets. They insist that you buy them through specific providers which aren't much cheaper than they have been in the past. So that's a false argument, and what we need now is an assurance that there will be no reduction in the sum of funding specifically available for school uniforms from here on in.
It is not the aim. The aim is to secure greater flexibility in order to ensure that we have a more flexible grant system that can deal with things such as giving children and learners more opportunities to go on trips, etc., and to look at a grant system that's less restricted than the present one.
Oh, well, let's have another go. After this announcement was made, the Welsh Government said it's because the cost of uniforms had reduced. Bevan Foundation called this a mealy-mouthed justification for a cut that would save a small sum. A head teacher in Bangor said uniform is a way of avoiding social stigma because people all look the same, and blasted what he called the bonfire over grants affecting some of the most vulnerable school children. And a Conservative Bridge End councillor described the move as heartless and said it would hit the poorest families the hardest. You were just asked clearly whether you would protect the funding. So can I ask you, yes or no, even if you won't answer whether you will protect the funding, will all Year 7 pupils in receipt of free school meals still be eligible for a school uniform grant?
Well, what we're looking to do is to do that and beyond. I mean, our commitment to the most disadvantaged pupils is there for all to see. We increased it to £93.7 million through the PDG spend. We are looking not just at school uniform items, but possibly the cost of school trips, stationery, extracurricular activities, school photographs, cost of equipment or resources. But I know the Education Secretary is mindful that while for the majority of schools uniform costs are now lower, there are still certain schools that aren't doing enough to keep costs down. And she is looking at whether there is merit in placing current guidance for school uniforms on a statutory footing.
Michelle Brown.
Thank you. The First Minister's already answered.
Question 6, Angela.
Question 6, Angela Burns.
Good afternoon, First Minister. How are you ensuring the transparency and accountability of information held by the Welsh Government?
Well, the Welsh Government has followed the principles of openness in government for many years. We comply with relevant legislation such as the Public Records Act, data protection and freedom of information. We're also active in terms of both the open data agenda and the wider open government agenda.
As a result of your altercation with Adam Price during FMQs on the 30th of January, I realised that if your government was seeking correspondent details between Adam Price and Aelodau'r University Health Board, then you may have asked the same questions about me. Indeed, for all I know, you may be collating information about all opposition members' correspondence with public sector bodies. And so I put a subject access request into your government on the 31st of January. 37 days later, I was asked for clarification, which I gave, and on March the 15th, I was asked for further clarification to what is essentially a very simple question, First Minister. And this I gave. I have heard nothing. Meanwhile, a local journalist put an FOI into the Health Board and got this answer. Aelodau'r University Health Board confirms that the information request from the Welsh Government made on the 26th of January 2018 was initially regarding Adam Price AM. However, upon acknowledgement of the information sent by the UHB on the same date, Welsh Government requested further information about the engagement activities regarding other MPs and AMs. So a local journalist, a local journo finds out from the Health Board that my communications have been shared with the Welsh Government, but the Welsh Government seem unable to give that information to me themselves, despite me being entitled
I can't hear Angela Burns because her fellow members are shouting across her. Angela Burns.
Thank you. My point, Presiding Officer, is a local journalist can do an FOI on the Health Board and get the exact same information that I put a subject access request into your government on at the end of January, and I've still had absolutely nothing. So an Assembly member can't get their information from you, a journo can from the Health Board. Your government is not transparent, is not accountable, and it makes me ask, what are you hiding?
Well, first of all, an FOI request is entirely separate to a DPA application, because DPA subject access requests are far broader. They're bound to be. I have to say, I mean, Darren Miller sits there pompously shouting disgrace. What does he think happens in Westminster? This is exactly what happens in Westminster. Theresa May, when she receives briefing, is quite, well...
Please, allow the First Minister to respond to the question.
Theresa May and other ministers... Theresa May and other ministers receive briefing on a member's interest in a question. That's normal. Plaid Cymru ministers, as Simon Thomas will be able to tell you, did exactly the same when they were in government. There's nothing sinister about it. When a member asks a question, it is quite normal for research to be done on what members said about it, perhaps what correspondence there is there, in order for ministers to be able to answer the question properly. That's all that ever happens. It's exactly the same situation that's existed for many years, all the time, since 1999, including members of Plaid Cymru. There's nothing wrong with it. And this is the way things are done in Westminster. What are the Conservatives... I know they've not been in government, but what do they think happens when an MP asks a question of a minister? It is standard briefing for a minister to be told what the MP has said in the past about it, what correspondence there might be, in order for the minister to be fully informed. That's the way things have always operated, both here and in Westminster. There's nothing sinister about it. In fact, it shows respect for the members.
Adam Price.
Comments by a former cabinet minister in your own government today clearly suggest that what happened in my case was not a one-off aberration, as you previously argued, but a part of a wider pattern, a smear machine whereby government resources have been systematically misused to silence and intimidate critics, including people within your own party. And I have to say, that together with the news today of an attempt to intimidate this Parliament with legal action clearly suggests a picture of a leadership culture within Welsh Government which is dedicated to crushing opposition, whatever the personal cost, whatever the political cost in terms of public trust in our democratic institutions. My question is a very simple one, but perhaps it's best directed to the people behind you. At what point do we say enough is enough?
Well, I prefer to stay with the people of Wales. I didn't disappear to America. I stayed and I fought my case for the people of Wales. Why doesn't he speak to Simon Thomas, who will tell him,
You attack me. You attack me personally. I'm requesting my personal attacks.
The First Minister...
You're attacking me again. You know,
the First Minister is attempting to answer the question. The First Minister is attempting to answer the question. Please allow him to finish.
Adam Price stood in this chamber and just attacked me personally. He complains when he gets it back. It's not one law for one and one law for the other. If he speaks to Simon Thomas, he will explain to him that this is quite normal and a norm.
There is at least one party in this room that's being very quiet and listening to the First Minister. I want all parties, political parties, allow the First Minister to finish his questions and answers.
The idea that members are subject to a smear machine is complete and utter nonsense. Well, look, if a member stands up in the chamber and attacks the First Minister, surely
allow the First Minister to finish.
If a member stands up in the chamber and questions and attacks another member, that member is entitled to respond. There are not special cases in this chamber, surely. It's part of the debate within this chamber. What I can assure members is no smear machine. That is absolute nonsense, wholly untrue and no basis in fact. It is true to say, as I've said before, that where members ask a question, then requests are made in terms of what a member has said, what correspondence might be available, in order to be able to assist the minister with an answer. Plaid Cymru ministers did exactly the same thing when they were in government. And why? Well, it shows respect to members. Surely ministers shouldn't go into questions without knowing anything about what the member has said about a particular issue.
To Cyfarfod
Llawn. Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the development of Welsh and education strategic plans?
Well, Aled Roberts was appointed in February 2018 for a 12-month period to implement the recommendations of the rapid review of the Welsh and Education strategic plans. 15 plans have been approved and work is ongoing with the remaining 7 authorities. We are committed to improving the planning of Welsh medium provision as outlined in Cymraeg 2050.
Now, further to that answer, and naturally, as you've already mentioned, following the statement made by the Minister for Lifelong Learning of the Welsh Language on the 15th of March, there are now 7 local authorities who have yet to have their WESPs approved by your government. 3 of those authorities, Swansea, Neath Port Talbot and Bridgend, are in my region. Indeed, their first draft plans were a disgrace and an utter embarrassment given your government's target of 1 million Welsh speakers. Are you therefore disappointed by the lack of vision and ambition at these Labour councillors in the South West, and what are you as a government doing as a government to progress matters?
Well, may I say, it was the Labour councils that were in the vanguard of establishing Welsh medium schools, particularly in South Wales. So they have a very good record on that. It's true to say that some authorities haven't come up to the standard we expect, and we have asked them to ensure that the plans are rewritten, redrafted in order to attain the ambitious target that we have. The Minister will speak with the leaders of those authorities who haven't had their WESPs approved at present, and we wish to ensure that every new WESP is submitted to the government.
Jane Bryan.
Question 8, Jane Bryan.
What plans does the Welsh Government have to support economic development in Newport?
Well, the Prosperity for All National Strategy and Economic Action Plan set out the actions we are taking to improve economic development across Wales, including Newport.
Thank you, First Minister. A regular, reliable service on the Ebervale to Newport rail link would ease congestion on our very busy roads and improve economic prosperity throughout the region. There is deep frustration as people have been waiting a long time for this to happen. 1 extra train per hour on the line running from Ebervale to Newport via Rogerstone and Pye Corner onto Cardiff will connect the valleys and 2 of the largest cities in South East Wales and vice versa. While I welcome the Welsh Government's commitment to increasing the frequency of the service on the Ebervale line, with the up-and-coming decision on the award of the rail franchise, can the First Minister provide reassurances that the Ebervale to Newport rail link will be a priority?
Well, we do remain committed to increasing frequency of services along the Ebervale line, and the options being considered do include services calling at Newport. It is important that the Ebervale line is consistent with our metro aspirations, so we will work with the winning bidder to identify the technical solution that's required to complete the infrastructure that's needed to enhance the number of services along the line.
Mark Reckless.
First Minister, Newport Council recently unveiled their master plan for the future of Newport city centre. But unfortunately, it contains so little detail and so little in the way of firm proposals, it only attracted 24 responses. Would he join me in encouraging Newport City Council to step up to the opportunities that the scrapping of the 7 tolls give and put real investment into the centre of Newport so we really benefit from those opportunities?
Well, I have to say Newport Council has an excellent record in terms of investment. We see, of course, the development across along the river, the university campus, the opening of the Friars Walk, which I was pleased to open some years ago now. So there has been significant development in the centre of Newport, and I'd expect the Council's good record to continue.
Steffan Lewis.
Llywydd. This week we saw the unprecedented step of a joint statement between the UK Cybersecurity Centre, the FBI and the US Department of Homeland Security, warning of heightened risks to our internet infrastructure and hardware from Russian state-sponsored hackers. And Newport is at the forefront of cybersecurity expertise with the excellent Cybersecurity Academy located in that city. What discussions is the First Minister planning to ensure that as we need to increase capacity in the UK to face this very real threat with economic and political implications for us all, what discussions is he planning with the UK government to ensure that it's not centralised in London? The UK response is actually shared between the different cities of the UK where expertise exists, and indeed to go even further and to say that the expertise and the remit of the UK Cybersecurity Centre should be shared to the areas where there is already existing expertise in places such as Newport.
No, I agree, and I know that the Cabinet Secretary is speaking at an event on Thursday that deals with this exact point. We are supporting a number of initiatives to assist the region's technology credentials. We have the UK's first National Software Academy, a new National Cyber Security Academy and Innovation Point, and the member is quite right to say that this work cannot be centralised in London, not just economically, but I would suspect from a security perspective as well.
Question now, Janet.
Question 9, Janet Finch-Saunders.
Diolch, Llywydd. What steps is the Welsh Government taking to help farmers and livestock owners affected by the current fodder shortage in Wales?
Well, the Cabinet Secretary for Energy, Planning and Rural Affairs is meeting the unions later this week and will discuss the current fodder situation. I understand that the NFU has opened its fodder bank.
Thank you, First Minister. Of course, straw last year was £42 a tonne bale. Now it's as much as 70. Hay, £90 a tonne. Clamp silage has gone up £15 a tonne to £40, and round bale silage has increased by over 230%. Now, on top of this is the price of transportation, adding an extra £10 per bale, and it's the situation, as you quite rightly point out, has led to NFU Cymru and Forage Aid to set up a fodder bank to allow their members to post listings to find much needed feed. This is affecting a lot of farmers in Aberconwy, and I ask you, First Minister, what are you doing to support our farmers, and will you confirm whether the Welsh Government is prepared to follow Ireland by helping farmers through subsidising some of the costs of this transportation?
Well, I mean, first of all, Farming Connect's locally based team of development officers are on hand to provide advice and guidance. We expect the weather to improve, of course, over the next few days, which may provide some relief. We are in contact with DEFRA and the other devolved administrations who are all monitoring the impact of persistent wet weather on farm businesses. And, of course, as part of that monitoring, we will continue to see what can be done to help farmers.
Acanola, Simon Thomas.
Finally, Simon Thomas. Thank you, Llywydd. The fact that the Irish government is willing to pay and to transport animal fodder is having an impact on the market across the British Isles, and it is having an impact on the market and putting prices up for farmers in Wales. I think that is the one thing that's become clear because of the wet spring that we've had, and what happens as a result of that is a broader question as to how we manage the market across the British Isles as we leave the European Union. It raises all sorts of questions on a customs union and the fact that the meat market is a common market between the Republic of Ireland, Wales and the rest of the British Isles. In addition to assisting farmers over this season's problems, can you tell us a little more about what the plan will be in order to ensure ongoing subsidy to farmers to ensure that they can be economically active as we leave the European Union?
The Farmers Union of Wales, of course, who had raised concerns about what the Irish government has done, whether it's legal or not, and that is something that we ultimately must consider. I understand now that the farmers are now seeing the hay growing because the change has changed. But there is a charity called Forage Aid which supports farmers and where they have been impacted by extreme weather conditions, and they can of course ensure that they can offer support to farmers. And so if some farmers have a major problem, then they should approach Forage Aid in the first place.
Thank you, First Minister. The next item is the business statement and announcement.